It's a Monday morning. Doesn't it feel like a Monday morning? We got rainy days and Mondays. We've got the political election underway, and listen to some of the headlines that have been out there during this election. We have this one: hate crimes rise, along with Donald Trump's anti-Muslim rhetoric. Does hateful rhetoric really lead to violence? That's another one. History gives us the answer. The answer is clearly yes. There's this one: the rise of hate crimes can be tied directly to hateful speech. This one: the Trump effect, hatred, fear, and bullying on the rise in schools. There's this one, and I looked for the headlines that said Hillary Clinton's rhetoric is fueling violence. Couldn't find them. Trump hate rhetoric fuels rise in school racial, ethnic tensions. More and more, everywhere I went over this past weekend, people were telling me that now there are people in their families, in their circle of friends, in their fraternal organizations, in their congregations, that they honestly have to avoid right now because they want to maintain the relationship. They want to maintain the peace. They want to maintain the familial ties. But if politics comes up, wow.
Officer Crap, you're really a square. This boy don't need a judge, he needs an analyst's care. It's just his neurosis that ought to be quiet. He's psychologically disturbed.
I'm disturbed. We're disturbed. We're disturbed.
I think we're all psychologically disturbed right now. I mean, even to the point where it's hurting our families and our personal relationships. So I decided we needed to turn to my friend Matt Townsend today to guide us through this. Matt, how do we deal with all of this? You know, literally, I had an associate this morning say that she no longer could talk or even get close to politics with her brother for fear it would do permanent damage. I have a KSL colleague here who said her discussions with her mother now regarding politics have to be avoided. One person said at the family dinner over the weekend, everybody just sat there because if anybody mentioned politics, it got nasty. How do we cope with this?
Holy cow, look what's happening, Doug. We're losing our sense of certain values and principles because of an election process, which is supposedly about certain values and principles. So we really are we're losing our sense of safety and trust and being loving and respecting and valuing one another's opinions simply because I don't like the words you're saying. And when it's one thing to have that at the political discourse, it's another thing when it comes home and this is your wife or your husband or your brother-in-law. So one of the keys, I guess, and I see it a lot with people, is we as humans, we have the ability to hear something that we don't like, and we still don't have to react and be angry. This is what separates the humans from the animals. If the animals feel threatened, they will more naturally just attack. But we as human beings, I don't have to hate you. I don't have to create ugly rhetoric just because I'm feeling tension with you.
Boy, when you look at what happened, I believe it was in North Carolina, where one of the Trump locations was actually vandalized, Molotov cocktail.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, this election more than any election in my memory, and boy, I remember a lot of political elections over the last how many years. I've never seen anything bring out the worst in us like this one.
I agree. Don't you think and some of it is just this history that I think a lot of people have had with Clinton, the pain that I think Trump is plugging into, but then kind of the morality slide that we see happening over and over. And I think in the end, Doug, this is why we've got to be clear what our goal is. And one of my rules in relationships is we've got to find a way, somehow, we've got to find a way to have the relationships of the people I'm talking to and communicating with be more valuable to me than my positions. The minute people don't matter and my positions matter more than people, we're starting to slide, especially in these most important relationships we've got.
I mentioned in a conversation even here on the air the other day that I'm surprised what this election has brought out in me. I find my blood boiling a little faster than it used to in other political conversations. I feel more strongly about the lack of choice that we have this time than I have ever seen before. And if you say anything against Trump, they assume you are for Clinton, and that is absolutely not true among most. And it's interesting, even in the papers like USA Today and even like Deseret News, where they came out and said, we just cannot support Donald Trump, but don't interpret this as an endorsement for Hillary Clinton. There are other people that are running as well. So I read an article in the Arizona Republic that is authored by the publisher down there talking about the death threats and the nasty, horrible things that they have been threatened with by the people that didn't like the fact that for the first time in their now very long history, for the first time, they endorsed a Democrat. I've never seen anything like it, Matt.
Oh, it is. No, honestly, this level of discourse, Doug, has dropped. But I think as low. I mean, obviously it can go lower, but I think it's taken us to a completely different level. And I think some of this is coming because so many people feel like they're not heard anymore. They feel like they've lost their voice. And remember, when people lose their voice, then violence and emotional outbursts becomes more of the way of communicating it. So what it almost sounds like the country needs more of are people listening. And even our candidates don't necessarily listen to us. They say they're listening to us, and they don't listen to each other. And so where we can take this to maybe fix some of this is bring it back home and start. And I'm finding with my own family, I need to teach my kids more and more about what's happening in the discourse, and there needs to be more listening and more understanding instead of kind of this knee-jerk reaction. If what we're going for is to elevate our sense of democracy, then we also have to become really good listeners. We have to know what our values are. We have to know what our principles are. And instead, what we do is I think we just use heightened rhetoric because that's what we see the candidates doing to get our position across.
Yeah. Matt, I need to – I know you got to run here in 1 second.
Yeah.
But just a little final quick question.
May I help you? I'm in sad shape. Wait a minute. Before you begin, I must ask that you pay in advance. 5 cents, please.
No 5 cents here. Matt's absolutely free this morning. Okay, You're standing at the water cooler. You're at the dinner table. You are somewhere, and you feel that conversation starting. You feel that energy. Your blood starts to boil. In 30 seconds, what do you do?
You know what I always do? I always take a really deep breath, and part of that is a sign to everyone else that you're impacting me. But the deep breath gives me a chance to create a space between my response, where I want to go off, and one thing I try to remember this, and Doug, I always ask myself this question: in the end, what do I value most here, and what is my real goal? Because if what I value most is the relationship, then I could still say, you know what, I'm not agreeing with what you're saying, but I will agree with your right to say it, and I'll try to understand it. But what I've learned, too, is sometimes some conversations are better just not having until you've got your head about you. So take a deep breath, ask yourself what your goal is and what really matters most here, and that actually takes you out of your reactive brain into a better place.
Deep breath. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate the free therapy session we're all getting here. I want to come back and I want to talk with you about what you have been experiencing. Have you been experiencing some of the things that I have that normally an election does not affect me like this one has? And I thought it was interesting that Matt came right out of the chute and he said so much of the disappointment and the rhetoric we've heard for so many years surrounding Hillary Clinton is wearing on people, even people that support her. And then the elevated rhetoric that we have never seen in the modern political era that is coming from Donald Trump is elevating our emotions. It's on both sides. On one side, it's maybe a little more downplayed, but just long-term baggage and disappointment that's come and the scandals one after another with the Clintons. And then on the other side, some of this bombastic, off-the-charts stuff we're hearing from Donald Trump. And I think part of what we're all feeling is the frustration of where do you go? Where do you turn? For whom do you vote? All right, I want to hear from you. Have you had those elevated, energetic conversations out there?
Doug's breaking news no one else has access to. More updates that affect you and Doug's Take. Coming up on KSL News Radio.